Chapter 9. The next day proved to be far brighter for myself and Holmes, in that the weather had much improved, and in the much anticipated visit of a famous author.
"Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Mr. Wells is here to see you,"
came the familiar voice of Mrs. Hudson from the downstairs inside front entrance of the house.
"Send him up, please, Mrs. Hudson."
Holmes raised his voice loud enough so that he did not have to immediately get up from the chair where he was seated. Shortly after, the person who we had seen on stage the night before came through the front door of Holmes's rooms. Both Holmes and I got up and walked towards our visitor and welcomed him.
"The pleasure is all mine, gentlemen,"
Wells replied in return.
"It is an honour to be in the company of two famous persons as yourselves."
While removing his coat and hat, Wells complimented Holmes by saying,
"I feel as if I already know you, Mr. Holmes, from Dr. Watson's Chronicles in the Strand."
"Mr. Wells,"
Holmes countered,
"I must tell you that Watson does have a tendency to magnify the few skills and abilities I put to use when solving a case. Since I rarely if ever get to read his notes before he has them published, I can only imagine that the account of both the crime and the criminal are far more interesting on paper than they ever were while I was dealing with either."
As all three of us sat down, Mrs. Hudson came in, bearing a silver tray. On it was a pot of freshly brewed tea, cups, saucers, spoons, cream and sugar. After tea was served all around, Mrs. Hudson left the room and Holmes started.
"I must compliment you on your performance at the St. James's Theatre the other night, Mr. Wells. I would have done so in person, but there was a gentleman in the audience that I had wished to talk with."
Holmes then asked Wells to give an outline of his story. Wells went on to tell Holmes about the inventor and his machine, where the inventor went in time, and the consequence of his travels.
"It would seem to be an awesome responsibility to own such a machine then,"
Holmes commented after.
"A lot of good could be done with it, as well as a lot of harm."
Then again, to assure himself as well as me, Holmes commented to Wells almost as if a question.
"It's good to know that such a machine is purely a work of only fiction and imagination then."
With that observation, Wells looked like he wanted to share some dark secret, because he paused before answering.
"I have not been entirely truthful with my readers and both of you on that matter."
Holmes's interest was piqued with Wells' surprising statement, and while looking directly at him, Holmes queried,
"How so?"
Wells, looking almost relieved to share his secret, replied,
"I have long thought that it might be possible, in theory at least, to have a set of mechanical drawings that could again, in theory, describe how to build my time machine. Gentlemen, the machine in my story is now one step beyond fiction, theory and imagination. I now own a set of mechanical drawings that, with the right materials, skills and abilities, it could be built."
As if somehow trying to sort this out, Holmes commented,
"Mr. Wells, do you realize that if you were to reveal to anyone on the High Street what you have just shared with Dr. Watson and myself, they would say that the venture is impossible, and that you have temporarily taken leave of your senses?"
Wells countered Holmes' statement with,
"Mr. Holmes, I have always believed that the only way to achieve the impossible is to believe it is possible."
I had rarely seen Holmes at a loss for words, no matter how shocking the revelation. But with Wells's unexpected news and unshakable conviction, this was one of those times. Holmes quickly recovered from the impact with two short questions.
"Mr. Wells, to assure myself I must ask you."
Holmes started.
"First, that the machine could be built, but cannot be built at this time, and second, that the mechanical drawings you speak of are safely under lock and key at all times."
With a silent nod of his head, Wells indicated yes to both questions.
"There we have it then."
Holmes started with a sigh of relief in his voice.
"I would suggest that you do not share this particular part of your work with anyone."
Then, changing direction, Holmes asked,
"Is there anyone, other than you, Watson and myself, that have any knowledge of these drawings?"
"No, Mr. Holmes. With the present state of affairs with my ex-wife, she has no knowledge of the drawings, much less where they are kept."
To end any further discussion of Wells's marital state, Holmes finished the conversation with,
"Well then, all of London can rest assured that nobody will be going forward in time to see what the city might look like in, say, 100 years' time."